We moved to Hollow Creek because we were out of options. That's not entirely true. We had options, just none that involved keeping Nora in a school that didn't share a building with a pawn shop, or eating something other than rice 4 nights a week. When the listing appeared on a pharmacy job board, pharmacist in charge, Hollow Creek Family Pharmacy, housing included, I showed Dana the salary and watched her expression go through 5 stages in about 3 seconds. Suspicion. Calculation. Hope. Guilt for hoping. And then a careful, measured nod. "Where is Hollow Creek?" she asked. I had to look it up. Western Pennsylvania, folded into a valley where the Alleghenies started getting serious about being mountains. Population 2,200, which was large enough to have a pharmacy and small enough that the pharmacist before me had also been the optometrist, or so the posting implied. The photos I found online were aggressively quaint: brick storefronts, an old stone bridge, a white church steeple visible from every angle. The kind of town that sold candles shaped like barns at its only gift shop. "It looks fine," Dana said, scrolling through the images on my phone. "It looks peaceful." Peaceful was the word we'd been using instead of desperate. A peaceful change. A peaceful transition for Nora. We were going to peacefully flee our cramped 2-bedroom in Garfield before the next rent increase made the decision for us. We drove in on a Thursday in late September. The valley opened up around a curve in Route 28 like a mouth, the hills on either side dense with trees just starting to turn. Hollow Creek sat at the bottom, and it did look peaceful, in the way that places people have quietly agreed to maintain look peaceful. The lawns were mowed. The sidewalks were swept. The bridge had flower boxes. The diner had a specials board propped outside with actual specials written on it. Our house was on Sycamore Lane, 4th from the end of a dead-end street, a yellow clapboard 2-story with a deep porch and more closet space than our entire Garfield apartment. The pharmacy had bought it in the 80s to attract candidates. I was the first to accept the position in 2 years. "Why do you think nobody else wanted it?" Dana asked as we unloaded boxes. She said it lightly, but she was genuinely asking. "Small town, middle of nowhere, probably doesn't have good Thai delivery." I was trying to be funny. She gave me the look that meant she'd accepted my answer while filing it away as insufficient. Nora, who was 7, had already found the backyard and was conducting an inventory of every stick and rock within the fence line. I could hear her narrating her findings to nobody. She'd been doing that since she was 4, constant internal monologue leaked externally, a running documentary about her life directed at an invisible audience. The pediatrician said it was normal. Dana said it was unsettling. I thought it was the funniest thing about her. Mrs. Calloway came by before we'd finished unloading. She was in her early 70s, silver-haired, with the build and bearing of someone who had opinions about how hedges should be trimmed and wasn't shy about sharing them. She carried a casserole in a ceramic dish covered with foil and a smile that was warm but structured, like she'd assembled it deliberately. "You must be the Landrys," she said. "The whole street's been wondering when you'd arrive." "Good things, I hope," Dana said. "Curious things, mostly. We don't get many new families." She handed Dana the casserole and looked past her into the house. Her eyes swept the entryway, the living room, the staircase. It wasn't nosy exactly, it was more like an inspection. Making sure everything was in order. "One thing," she said, turning back to me. "You'll want to check that all your locks work. The back door especially, the Petersons never did fix the latch on that one." The Petersons? Previous tenants. They were lovely. She said it in the past tense with a firmness that didn't invite follow-up. "Anyway. Welcome to Hollow Creek. You'll settle in just fine." She left before we could invite her in for coffee. We spent the afternoon unpacking essentials, bedding, kitchen basics, Nora's collection of stuffed animals that she arranged in a precise hierarchy she'd never explained. By evening, the house felt almost livable. Dana made pasta on the old gas stove while I wrestled with the thermostat, which had 3 settings: off, volcanic, and a cryptic symbol that might have been a snowflake or a drawing of a spider. Dinner was quiet. Good quiet. Nora ate without complaining, which was a miracle. Dana looked at the kitchen, the big window over the sink, the tile backsplash, the wooden cabinets that had survived at least 5 decades of use, and I could see her making peace with the decision. Not thrilled. Not relieved. Just making peace. "I think this could work," she said. "Yeah. Don't make it weird. I'm just saying the house is nice." Nora went down at 8. She was asleep within minutes, something about the air here, maybe, or the exhaustion of discovery. Dana and I sat on the porch with the last of a bottle of wine we'd been saving for the occasion, though the occasion was really just survival. The street was dark. Hollow Creek didn't have much in the way of streetlights, a few at intersections, one at the end of Sycamore Lane, buzzing with a yellowish hum that attracted a constellation of moths. The houses around us were lit but curtained. The silence was enormous. "It's so quiet," Dana said. "That's the point." "No, I mean, listen. There's nothing. No traffic, no sirens, no." The siren went off at 9:47 p.m. It wasn't like any siren I'd heard before. Not a police siren, not a tornado warning. It was a single sustained tone, low, resonant, almost mechanical, like someone had struck a tuning fork the size of a building. It came from everywhere at once, reflected off the hills and folded back into itself until the whole valley hummed with it. It lasted maybe 10 seconds. Then silence. "What the hell was that?" I said. Dana was already on her feet, looking up and down the street. Every house had gone dark. Not gradually, simultaneously. As if every hand in every house had reached for every light switch at the same moment. The only light left was the street lamp at the end of the road, still buzzing, and the glow from our own windows. Footsteps. Fast. Someone running on the sidewalk. Ray Garland came up our porch steps 2 at a time. He lived 3 houses down. I'd seen him that afternoon, a big man in his 50s with a sun-damaged face and mechanic's hands, waving from his driveway while we unloaded. He'd seemed relaxed then. He did not seem relaxed now. "Inside," he said. "Right now. Both of you. What's going inside? Lights off. Every one of them. Close your curtains, lock your doors, and do not open them for anyone." His voice was low and fast and stripped of everything except urgency. He wasn't looking at us. He was looking at the street behind him. "Ray, what? There is no time for what. Do it now and I will explain tomorrow. Do it now." I'd like to say I demanded answers. I'd like to say I stood my ground and insisted on understanding the situation before complying. But there are moments when another person's fear is so absolute, so unperformable, that your body responds before your brain can object. Dana and I went inside. Ray turned and sprinted back toward his own house. I heard his door slam 30 seconds later. We killed the lights. I went through the house in the dark, front door locked, back door locked, the latch was bad, Mrs. Calloway was right, but the deadbolt worked, windows latched, curtains drawn. Dana checked on Nora. Still asleep. I found Dana in the hallway upstairs, standing in the dark with her arms crossed, and I could feel her anger even though I couldn't see her face. "What is this?" she whispered. "I don't know. This is insane. Is this some kind of knocking?" 3 knocks on the front door. Measured. Polite. The kind of knocking a neighbor does when they're returning a borrowed tool. We both froze. I moved to the top of the stairs and looked down. Through the frosted glass panel beside the front door, I could see a shape. A silhouette. Person-shaped. Standing on the porch. 3 more knocks. Same rhythm. Same politeness. My phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't recognize: "Do not open the door. Do not answer. It is not me. Ray." I showed Dana. Her eyes went wide. "What does he mean, it is not me?" she whispered. The shape outside knocked again. And then it spoke. "Hey, it's Ray." The voice was Ray's. Exactly Ray's, the same gravel, the same Western PA vowels, the same cadence. "Sorry to bother you again. I forgot to tell you something. Can you open up for a second?" Dana grabbed my arm. Her fingers dug in hard enough to leave marks I'd find the next morning. "It sounds like him," she breathed. "He said it's not him. But it sounds." "Hey," the voice said again. Patient. Friendly. "I know this is weird, your first night and all. I just need to tell you one more thing. It'll take 2 seconds." We stood in the dark hallway and did not move and did not breathe and did not answer. The knocking continued for another 40 minutes. I counted. The voice tried different approaches, casual, then concerned, then worried. "Are you guys okay in there? I saw your lights go off, just wanted to check on you." It never sounded angry. It never sounded threatening. It sounded exactly like a concerned neighbor, and that was the worst part, because the text on my phone said otherwise. At 11:23, the siren sounded again. Same tone, same duration. 10 seconds of that low, bone-deep hum. The knocking stopped. The shape on the porch was gone. After a while, lights started coming back on in the other houses, one by one, like a town slowly remembering how to breathe. I watched through a gap in the curtain as Ray's porch light flickered on. His front door opened. He stepped out, looked up and down the street, and went back inside. My phone buzzed again. Same number. "Good. You listened. I'll come by in the morning." Neither of us slept. Ray came by at 7 with 2 coffees and a look on his face that I recognized from my father, the expression of a man about to explain something he wished didn't need explaining. We sat at the kitchen table. Dana was upstairs getting Nora dressed. I'd told her I wanted to hear Ray out alone first. She'd agreed, which told me she was more frightened than angry. "How much do you know about Hollow Creek?" Ray asked. "I know it has a pharmacy that can't keep a pharmacist." He almost smiled. "Right. So. What I'm about to tell you is going to sound like I've lost my mind. I need you to sit with it before you react. Okay. When the siren sounds, and it will sound again, it sounds a few times a week, always after dark, never on a schedule, you go inside. Immediately. You lock everything. Doors, windows, anything that opens. You close your curtains. You turn off your exterior lights. You do not look outside. I looked outside last night." He paused. "Through the curtain. Through a gap. Don't do that again. And I mean that in the most literal way I've ever meant anything." He took a breath. "You don't answer the door. Not for me, not for your wife, not for your daughter. If they're inside when the siren sounds, good. If they're not." He stopped. "If they're not. They need to be inside. Make sure they're always inside before dark. That's the most important thing. Ray, what is outside?" He looked at his coffee. "I don't know what they are. Nobody does. They've been here since the town was founded, near as anyone can tell. They come when the siren sounds and they leave when it sounds again. In between, they walk the streets and they try to get inside. They knock. They talk. They sound like people you know. They look like people you know. But they are not people you know. How is that possible?" I said you'd think I'd lost my mind. I heard it. Last night. It sounded exactly like you. I know. It always picks someone the target trusts. Someone you'd open the door for. He looked up. The Petersons opened the door. The name hit differently now. What happened to them? Dave Peterson opened the door on a Thursday night in March. He heard his wife calling from the porch. Except his wife was upstairs. The thing that sounded like his wife walked into his house and Ray turned his coffee cup in his hands. They were gone by morning. All three of them, Dave, Michelle, the boy. Nobody saw them leave. No moving truck. Cars were still in the driveway. House was empty and every door was standing open. I sat with that for a long time. There are other rules, Ray said. I'll write them down. They sound arbitrary but they aren't. Every single one exists because somebody, at some point, did the thing the rule says not to do. And we learned from what happened to them. He wrote them on the back of a pharmacy flyer I had on the counter. His handwriting was neat and deliberate, like a man who understood that precision mattered. When the siren sounds, go inside immediately. Lock all doors and windows. Close all curtains and blinds, do not look outside. Turn off all exterior lights, interior lights optional but recommended off. Do not open the door for any reason. Do not respond to knocking. Do not respond if you hear your name. If someone in your household was outside when the siren sounded, do not let them back in until the all clear. Do not discuss what you heard the next day. Wait for the second siren. It always comes. That second to last one, I said. About not letting someone back in. I know. That's asking me to leave my family outside with those things. I know what it's asking. I'm telling you the rule. And if I don't follow it? Ray finished his coffee and stood up. Then whatever comes inside with them is your problem. And your neighbor's problem. And this whole street's problem. He put his hand on my shoulder. I'm not trying to scare you. I'm trying to keep you alive. Follow the rules. It works. It's worked for almost 200 years. He left. I sat at the kitchen table and looked at the list and felt the specific kind of dread that comes from encountering something that is both real and impossible at the same time. I didn't tell Dana about the rules right away. Not the full version. I told her the siren was a local thing, an old civil defense system the town still used, and that when it sounded, people went inside as a precaution. She looked at me the way she always looked at me when she knew I was only telling part of the truth, which was the same way she looked at Nora when Nora said she hadn't eaten the last cookie. A precaution against what? He didn't say exactly. Some kind of animal concern. An animal concern. Bears, maybe. They're in the mountains. That thing at our door last night was not a bear. I know. I'm going to find out more today. Can you just trust me for today? She didn't answer, which was its own answer. But she didn't push it, and I understood that as the narrowest form of grace. I went to the pharmacy that morning to meet Dr. Elkin, who owned the practice and was, at 76, ready to stop filling prescriptions and start filling his days with nothing. He was a thin, kind man with half-moon reading glasses and a laugh that was slightly too loud for his frame. He showed me the dispensary, the inventory system, paper ledgers, God help me, and the patient files that went back to the 1970s. You heard the siren last night, he said. It wasn't a question. First night. Hell of a welcome. Yes. Well. The town has its peculiarities. He said it the way someone might describe a relative with an embarrassing habit, fondly, with resignation. You follow the rules and it's a wonderful place to live. Best community I've ever known. People look after each other. Because they have to. He peered at me over his glasses. That's not a bad reason to look after each other, is it? After my shift, I went to the town library. It was a single room in the basement of the municipal building, staffed by a woman named Carol who was either the librarian or just someone who had been there so long that the distinction had stopped mattering. I told her I was interested in local history. "Everyone who moves here is interested in local history," she said, not unkindly. For about a week. She pointed me to a shelf of local publications, self-printed histories, church records, anniversary booklets. I spent 3 hours reading. Most of it was standard small-town chronicle: who built what, who married whom, which floods destroyed which bridges. But there were gaps. Careful, deliberate gaps. Years where the records went thin. Names that appeared once and then vanished. References to the arrangement and the understanding, without explanation, as if the authors assumed any reader would already know. The oldest document was a handwritten account from 1851, for years after the town's founding. It was attributed to a man named Josiah Parnell, who had been part of the original settling party. The paper was behind glass and Carol wouldn't let me touch it, but I read it through the case. Most of it was mundane: crop yields, property disputes, the construction of the first church. But one passage stopped me. "We have come to terms with what abides here. The bell shall serve as warning and the doors shall serve as covenant. What walks between the sounding and the ceasing is not ours to confront. We were told the cost of this valley and we agreed to pay it. Let no man break this compact, for the consequence is not his alone to bear." I read it 3 times. The language was specific: what abides here, the cost of this valley, the compact. This wasn't superstition. This was a contract. I went to the town clerk's office next. The clerk was a young woman named Tessa who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else and was refreshingly indifferent to my nosiness. I asked about the Siren, when it was installed, who maintained it, whether there was a schedule. "Installed in 1963 to replace the church bells," she said. "Public Works maintains it. There's no schedule. It goes when it goes." "Who triggers it?" She looked at me. "Nobody triggers it. It's automatic. It goes when it goes," she repeated, and I understood that this was the final answer I was going to get. But Tessa, whether out of indifference or subtle rebellion, left me alone in the records room for 20 minutes while she went on a break. That's where I found the ledger. It wasn't hidden. It was on a shelf with other municipal records, tax rolls, zoning maps, water commission minutes. A black hardcover book, unlabeled, its pages dense with handwriting from dozens of different hands spanning decades. Each entry was a date, a name, and a brief notation. March 3, 1952, Harold Ennis, outside during sounding, returned at cessation, no apparent effects. June 17, 1955, Margaret Cope, outside during sounding, did not return. October 2, 1958, William and Anna Fraser, open door, house vacant by morning. November 19, 1961, Richard Cole, looked through window during sounding, returned to normal after 3 weeks. And on it went. Dozens of entries across decades. Some people went outside and came back. Some went outside and didn't. Some opened their doors and were simply gone. The entries from the 1970s onward included more detail, a pharmacist's precision, I realized, and wondered if Dr. Elkin had been the one keeping records. February 8, 1978, Susan Marks, responded to knocking, open front door, subject appeared disoriented for 2 days, returned to baseline behavior, minor lapse. September 14, 1983, James Otten, exited home during sounding to retrieve dog from yard, did not return, dog found on porch at cessation, unharmed. March 22, 2019, Peterson family, David, Michelle, Corey, open door, responded to mimicry, house vacant by morning, vehicles and belongings remained, classified as relocation. Classified as relocation. I felt sick. They had a word for it. A bureaucratic notation. These people were gone, consumed, taken, erased, and the town had reduced it to a line item in a ledger. I took photos of every page with my phone. I went home and sat in my car in the driveway for 10 minutes, trying to reconcile the town I'd driven through that morning, the specials board at the diner, Mrs. Calloway watering her garden, kids riding bikes on Maple, with what I'd just read. This is the part where a normal person would leave. Pack up the family, forfeit the deposit, drive back to Pittsburgh and eat rice forever. I want to be clear about why I didn't. It wasn't courage. It wasn't curiosity, though I had plenty of both. It was the fact that Nora had come home from her first day at school and told us, over dinner, that she'd made 2 friends and that the playground had a tire swing and that her teacher had a turtle named President and that this was the best place she'd ever lived. She said that. 7 years old, sitting in a kitchen with bad lighting and cabinet doors that didn't close all the way, and she said this is the best place I've ever lived. I looked at Dana. Dana looked at me. And I understood that we were going to follow the rules. The second siren came 3 nights later. We were ready. Nora was in bed by 7:30. By 8, every lock was checked, every curtain drawn, every exterior light killed. Dana and I sat in the living room in the dark and waited. The siren sounded at 9:15. That same low, sustained tone, rising out of the valley floor like the earth itself was exhaling. 10 seconds. Then silence. Then footsteps. They came from multiple directions, not just one set, but several, overlapping, different cadences. Some slow. Some quick. I heard them pass the house, pause, continue. The sidewalk. The street. The yard. Knocking at the back door. Not the front, the back, where the latch was bad. 3 measured raps. A woman's voice. Mrs. Calloway. Hello. I saw your light on earlier, just wanted to make sure you got settled. I brought some cookies for the little one. Dana's hand found mine in the dark. Her fingers were ice. The knocking moved around the house. Back door. Side window. Front door. Always 3 knocks. Always a familiar voice. Mrs. Calloway. Then Dr. Elkin. Then, horribly, Nora's teacher, a woman named Ms. Vance whom we'd met once, for 10 minutes, at school orientation. Mr. Landry. It's Beth Vance. I have Nora's art project, she forgot it today. Can I leave it with you? I sat in the dark and listened to the voice of a woman I barely knew, perfectly replicated, asking me about my daughter's art project. And I understood, viscerally, why the rules existed. Because the voices were not threatening. They were kind. They were helpful. They were everything you'd want to hear from a neighbor at your door. That was the trap. The knocking stopped at the front door. Silence. Long silence, 5 minutes, 10. I started to relax. Dana's grip loosened. Then a new voice. Small. High. Directly outside the living room window. Daddy. Every muscle in my body locked. Dana made a sound, not a word, just a sound, something between a gasp and a moan. Daddy, I'm outside. I went to get my shoes and the door locked. Can you let me in? Nora was upstairs. I knew Nora was upstairs. Dana had checked on her 15 minutes ago. Nora was upstairs, asleep, in her bed, surrounded by stuffed animals arranged in her precise, inexplicable hierarchy. But the voice was hers. Not approximate. Not close. Hers. Her exact pitch, her exact rhythm, the way she said, Daddy, with the emphasis on the first syllable, the way she stretched, outside, into 3 syllables when she was nervous. Every phonetic fingerprint was perfect. I'm cold, Daddy. Dana was crying silently. I could feel her shaking. I held her hand so tight I thought I'd break something. I need to check, she whispered. I need to go upstairs and check. Go. Don't turn on any lights. She went. I heard her footsteps on the stairs, soft and careful. I sat in the living room, alone, and listened to my daughter's voice asking to be let inside. It went on for 15 minutes. It tried different approaches, scared, then sad, then matter-of-fact. "Daddy, I'm just on the porch. You can open the door for 1 second." Dana came back down. She leaned close to my ear. "She's asleep. She's in bed." I touched her. "She's warm. She's real." "I know." "Then what is that?" I didn't have an answer. The voice outside stopped. In the silence that followed, I did something I shouldn't have done. I went to the living room window, the big one facing the street, and I pulled the curtain back half an inch. The street was silver with moonlight. The other houses were dark, sealed, curtains drawn like eyelids shut against a sight they'd learned not to see. The street lamp at the end of Sycamore Lane had gone out. They were standing in the street. There were 7 of them. They stood at irregular intervals along the lane, perfectly still, facing different houses. They looked like people. Ordinary people in ordinary clothes, a man in a flannel shirt, a woman in a cardigan, a teenager in a hoodie. The proportions were right. The postures were right. They looked like they could be anyone in town, paused in the middle of an evening walk. But they weren't moving. Not shifting weight, not breathing visibly, not blinking. They stood with the absolute stillness of something that had learned what standing looked like but hadn't yet learned why people fidget. And then, as I watched, all 7 of them turned their heads. Toward me. Not toward my house. Toward the window. Toward the half-inch gap in my curtain. Toward my eye, specifically, pressed against the glass. 7 heads rotating in unison, smoothly, with a mechanical precision that human necks do not possess. They saw me looking. And they started walking toward the house. I dropped the curtain and stepped back so fast I knocked over a lamp. Dana grabbed me. "What? What did you see?" They know I was looking. Footsteps on the porch. On the lawn. On both sides of the house. The knocking resumed, but different now. Not polite. Not 3 measured raps. Fast, urgent, overlapping. Every door, every window, all at once. Not pounding, not angry, but insistent. The way a crowd knocks when they all need in at the same time. And voices. All of them at once. Ray, Mrs. Calloway, Dr. Elkin, Ms. Vance, Nora. Overlapping, layered, all saying different things but all asking the same question: "Let me in, let me in, let me in." It lasted until the second siren. 23 minutes. The longest 23 minutes of my life. In the morning, Ray came by. He didn't bring coffee this time. "You looked," he said. "How do you know?" "Because they were all over your house last night. The whole street heard it. You drew them. That's why the rule exists: when you look at them, they see you. And when they see you, they focus." "I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry. Be better." He looked tired. Not angry, tired in the way of a man who has had the same conversation too many times. "They'll remember your house now. It'll be more intense for a while. A few weeks, maybe. They'll send things that sound more real, try harder. But if you hold, if you follow the rules, they'll spread back out. They always do." I told Dana everything that night. All of it, the ledger, the history, Josiah Parnell's compact, the Petersons. I showed her the photos on my phone. She sat at the kitchen table and scrolled through names and dates and tidy notations of people who had simply stopped existing, and when she was done, she set the phone down and looked at me with an expression I'd never seen on her. "We need to leave," she said. "Nora loves it here. I don't care about the tire swing. I care about our daughter being alive. We don't know that leaving is safer." We don't know what happens if we try. People leave. Ray said people have left. Some people. I haven't found any record of what happened to the ones who did. That landed. She was quiet for a long time. So we're trapped. We're not trapped. We're choosing to stay somewhere that has a manageable danger, as long as we follow rules. You sound like them. You sound like Ray. She was right. I did sound like them. And I hated it. But I also looked at the numbers in that ledger. In almost 200 years, maybe 40 people had been taken. 40 out of thousands who had lived perfectly normal lives in a town that, Siren aside, was genuinely good. Those weren't terrible odds. They were the odds of living near a flood plain or a highway with a bad curve. Every place has its danger. Hollow Creek just had the honesty to sound a siren about it. Dana didn't agree with me. But she didn't leave. And over the next few weeks, we settled into the rhythm of it, the bizarre, impossible, utterly normalized rhythm of a town that locked itself indoors several nights a week and pretended, by daylight, that nothing had happened. Nora was the easiest to adapt. Children are like that, you tell them the rule and they follow it without needing the reason. When the siren sounds, we go inside, we lock up, we stay quiet. To her, it was like a fire drill. Routine. She didn't hear the voices the way we did. Her bedroom was on the second floor, facing the backyard, and she slept through most of it. Except when she didn't. Nora had been a sleepwalker since she was 5. Not often, once or twice a month, usually triggered by disrupted sleep or new environments. In Pittsburgh, it hadn't been dangerous, our apartment was small and the doors had chain locks too high for her to reach. But here, in a house with a bad backdoor latch and a yard that opened onto a town where things walked the streets at night, it was a different calculation entirely. I installed a bolt lock on her bedroom door. A slide bolt, high up, on the outside. Dana hated it. You're locking our daughter in her room. I'm keeping her from walking outside during a siren. What if there's a fire? Then I'll open the bolt. I'm right down the hall. And if you're not? If it happens fast? Dana, if she walks outside during a siren, there is no coming back from that. A fire I can fight. What's out there, I can't. She let it go. But she checked the bolt every night before bed, running her fingers over it like a rosary, and I could see the war in her face, the impossibility of choosing between dangers when both were real and neither was acceptable. I kept researching. Not because I thought I'd find a solution, I'd accepted, by then, that there wasn't one, but because the pattern in the ledger bothered me. The disappearances weren't random. They clustered. Every 15 to 20 years, there'd be a spike, 3 or 4 people taken in a single year, then nothing for a long stretch. I mapped the dates and the pattern was clear: 1955, 1971, 1989, 2003, 2019. 2019 was the Petersons. We were in a cluster period. I brought this to Ray on a Saturday afternoon. We were in his garage, which he'd converted into a workshop where he rebuilt small engines with the focus and precision of a surgeon. I know about the cycle, he said, not looking up from a carburetor. Then you know we're due. I know. And nobody's doing anything about it. He set down his wrench. What would you have us do? I don't know. Warn people. Prepare. Something beyond just locking doors. Everyone in this town is warned. Everyone is prepared. The rules are the preparation. You follow them, you survive. The Petersons followed them. Until they didn't. And that's the point. The system works until someone breaks it. That's not the system's fault. I looked at him, this man I'd come to genuinely like, this decent, practical, frightened man, and I saw the infrastructure of acceptance that held Hollow Creek together. Not ignorance. They weren't ignorant. They knew exactly what walked their streets. The acceptance was operational. It was the decision, renewed every morning, to live normally in an abnormal place, and the thing that made it possible was the belief that the rules were sufficient. That compliance was survival. What if the rules aren't enough? I said. Then we're all dead anyway, and knowing that doesn't help. It happened on a Tuesday in late October. Nora had been having a bad week, nightmares, restless sleep, twice waking up disoriented in the hallway before Dana guided her back to bed. The new environment, the disrupted routine, the subtle ambient stress that even a 7-year-old could absorb even if she couldn't name it. Her sleepwalking was getting worse. I checked the bolt on her door every night. Checked it twice. 3 times. It became my own ritual, my own rosary. That Tuesday, Dana was sick. A stomach bug she'd picked up from Nora, who'd brought it home from school. She went to bed at 6, feverish and miserable, and I managed the evening alone, dinner for Nora, bath time, stories, bed. I bolted her door. I checked it. I checked it again. I went downstairs to clean the kitchen. I turned on the radio, an AM station out of Johnstown that played classic country and farm reports. I did the dishes. I wiped the counters. I stood at the kitchen sink and looked at my reflection in the dark window above it. The siren sounded at 8:52. I moved fast. Lights off. Curtains checked. Front door locked. Back door, the back door. The back door was open. Not wide open. Ajar. 6 inches. The latch, the bad latch misses. Calloway had warned about, the latch I'd been meaning to fix for a month and hadn't, had slipped. Cool air poured through the gap. The backyard was a rectangle of darkness beyond the porch. I closed it. Threw the deadbolt. Turned around and went upstairs. Nora's door was closed. The bolt was drawn. I opened it. Her bed was empty. The window was open. The curtain billowed inward with night air. Her stuffed animals were arranged on the pillow in their usual hierarchy, as if she'd placed them carefully before she left. Her shoes were by the bed. She was barefoot. I went downstairs in 3 strides. I looked through the kitchen window. I didn't care about the rule anymore, about drawing attention, about any of it, and I saw her. She was standing in the middle of the backyard. Barefoot on the grass. Eyes closed. Arms at her sides. Sleepwalking. She'd climbed out the window, something she'd never done before, something I hadn't thought to account for, and now she was standing 20 feet from the house in the open air with the siren's echo still rolling off the hills and things beginning to walk. I could see them at the edge of the yard. At the property line where our fence met Ray's. On the sidewalk beyond. They were already there, 3, then 4, coming down Sycamore Lane with that smooth, too fluid gait. They hadn't reached the yard yet. But they were coming. I should tell you what went through my mind. The rule said, if someone in your household was outside when the siren sounded, do not let them back in until the all clear. The rule existed because something could come in with them. Because opening the door during a sounding was how the Petersons disappeared. Because the compact, the 200-year-old covenant that Josiah Parnell had signed in ink and fear, depended on closed doors and human restraint. I should tell you that I weighed the options. That I calculated the risk. That I thought about Dana upstairs, sick, vulnerable. That I considered the neighbors, the town, the compact that kept 2,000 people alive. I didn't think about any of that. My daughter was outside. I grabbed the fire axe from the hook by the back door. I'd bought it the first week, told Dana it was for firewood, and I went out. The air was different during a sounding. Heavier. It tasted like metal and ozone, like the atmosphere before a lightning strike. The moonlight was strong enough to see by, but the shadows were wrong, too sharp, too defined, as if the objects casting them were denser than they should have been. Nora was 15 feet away. Still standing. Still asleep. I crossed the yard and scooped her up with one arm, the axe in the other hand. She was warm. Real. Her heartbeat against my chest was rapid but steady. They were at the fence line. Up close, the wrongness was specific. I'd seen them from behind a curtain and thought they looked like people. They did look like people, the way a photograph looks like a person, the way a wax figure looks like a person. The geometry was correct but the substance was off. Their skin had a faintly reflective quality, like something that had learned what skin looked like from a description rather than a mirror. Their eyes were open but didn't track, they faced forward while their bodies oriented toward me, as if the eyes and the attention were operated by different mechanisms. And I recognized them. Not all of them, but two. One had the face of Harold Ennis, who had been outside during a sounding in 1952 and was listed in the ledger as returned, no apparent effects. He looked exactly as he must have looked in 1952, a man in his 30s, work clothes, a face I recognized from a photo in the library's historical collection. He hadn't aged. He'd been standing in Hollow Creek's nights for over 70 years, wearing the same clothes, with the same face, and his eyes didn't blink. The other was a teenage boy in a Hollow Creek High School sweatshirt. The style was from the late 80s. I didn't know his name, but I knew he was in the ledger somewhere. They all were. Every person who'd been taken, they weren't gone. They were here. Remade. Recycled into something that walked the streets during soundings, wore the faces of the lost, and knocked on doors with borrowed hands. The one that looked like Harold Ennis reached for Nora. I swung the axe. It connected with the thing's forearm, not chopping, more of a batting motion, driven by panic rather than precision. The impact felt wrong. Not like hitting flesh or bone. Like hitting packed clay, cold and dense and slightly yielding. The thing's arm bent at an angle that arms do not bend, and it made a sound. Not a scream. A tone. A single, sustained note, pitched somewhere between a human voice and the siren itself. It came from the thing's open mouth and it was loud, loud enough that I felt it in my teeth, in my sternum, in the backs of my eyes. The other things in the yard stopped moving. The ones on the sidewalk turned. Everything turned. And then the one I'd hit bled. Dark fluid, almost black in the moonlight, welling from the break in its surface. It ran down the thing's arm and dripped onto the grass, and where it fell, the grass blackened and curled like paper in a flame. I ran. Back to the house. Through the back door. Slam. Deadbolt. I stood in the dark kitchen holding my sleeping daughter and shaking so badly I had to lean against the counter to stay upright. Nora hadn't woken. She breathed against my neck, slow and peaceful, dreaming of whatever 7-year-olds dream about while their fathers break covenants. The second siren sounded 11 minutes later. In those 11 minutes, the knocking was unlike anything I'd experienced. Every door, every window, the walls themselves. Not polite. Not mimicking. Just force, fast, relentless, coordinated, as if something was testing every possible point of entry simultaneously. The voices were gone. No more Ray, no more Mrs. Calloway, no more borrowed names and borrowed trust. Just the knocking and, beneath it, that tone, that sustained, vibrating, subsonic hum, like the thing I'd hurt was still screaming from its open mouth and the valley was carrying the sound. When the second siren sounded and the silence came, I carried Nora upstairs and put her in bed. I nailed her window shut. I bolted her door. I went to the bathroom and threw up until there was nothing left. By morning, everyone on Sycamore Lane knew. I don't know how, maybe they heard, maybe they saw through their own curtain gaps, maybe the town had ways of knowing that didn't require telling. But when I walked outside at 7, Ray was standing in my driveway. He was not alone. Mrs. Calloway was there, and Tom Hendricks from the end of the block, and 2 men I recognized from the diner but had never spoken to. Their faces were not friendly. Ray's expression was something I'd never seen on him. Not anger exactly. Something older and colder and more tired. "What did you do?" he said. "Nora was outside. She sleepwalked through the window. I went to get her. And one of them grabbed for her. I hit it. With the axe." The silence that followed was physical. Mrs. Calloway put her hand over her mouth. Tom Hendricks took a step back, as if I'd become something he didn't want to be near. "You hit one of them," Ray repeated. "Yes. In almost 200 years, nobody has struck one of them. Nobody has touched one of them. The compact is about separation. They walk, we hide. They knock, we don't answer. The door stays closed. That is the entire arrangement. That is what keeps this town alive. It was reaching for my daughter, Ray. People have been outside during soundings and come back. It happens. The ledger. Some come back. Some don't. I wasn't going to gamble with Nora. So you gambled with all of us instead. That stopped me. The compact," he said, "is a boundary. They stay outside. We stay inside. Nobody crosses. Nobody interferes. What you did, going out there, attacking one of them, that's not a violation. It's a breach. You broke the boundary in a way nobody has broken it before. From their side, from whatever they are and however they think, a human being crossed the line and drew blood. They don't know why. They don't care why. They just know the line moved. You don't know that anything will change," I said. But my voice was thin even to my own ears. "I know that in my 53 years in this town, the siren has never sounded during daylight," Ray said. "Not once." "What does that?" "The siren went off. 7:16 in the morning. The sun was fully up. The sky was October blue and cloudless. Down the street, a mother was buckling her son into a car seat for the drive to school. And the siren, that low, bone-deep, valley-filling tone, erupted from the water tower and swallowed every other sound in the world." Ray's face drained of color. He turned and ran for his house without another word. Mrs. Calloway followed, faster than I'd have thought possible. Tom Hendricks and the others scattered like startled birds. Within 30 seconds, Sycamore Lane was empty and every door on the street was shut. I went inside. Dana was at the top of the stairs, still pale from the bug, holding Nora's hand. "Why is it going off?" she whispered. "It's daytime. You said it only happens at night. Lock yourself in the bedroom with Nora. Now." She heard something in my voice and didn't argue. I heard the bedroom door close. The lock click. I went through the house. Locks. Curtains. Lights. The routine I'd performed dozens of times. But sunlight leaked through the edges of every curtain, thin and amber, and in that filtered glow, the inside of my house was visible in a way it never had been during nighttime soundings. I could see the walls. The cracks. The place above the living room window where the plaster had split the night before. And then I heard something new. Not knocking. Not voices. A low, constant pressure against the exterior of the house. Not at the doors or windows, at the walls themselves. The drywall flexed slightly inward, a subtle bowing that I might have missed if I hadn't been staring directly at it. A new crack appeared in the plaster above the kitchen door, traveling upward in a slow, branching line. Something was pressing against the outside of the house. Not trying to get in through an opening. Trying to get in through the structure itself. The curtain over the front window shifted. Not from wind, from contact. Something was pressing against the glass, and the fabric molded around it, showing the shape of a hand. Then another hand. Then 6 more, spreading across the window like fingers pressed against the inside of a membrane. This was new. In 200 years of the compact, they had never tried to come through walls. They had knocked. They had called. They had mimicked and pleaded and waited with infinite patience. But they had always stopped at the threshold, because the threshold was the line, and the line was the compact, and the compact had held. I had broken the compact. And now the walls were just walls. I went to the window. I knew the rule. I knew that looking drew them. I knew that every rule existed because someone had paid the price of breaking it and the town had written it down and moved on. But the rules had changed. I had changed them. And I needed to see what I'd made. I pulled the curtain back. The street was full of them. Not 7, like the first time I'd looked. Not a dozen. I stopped counting at 40. They filled Sycamore Lane from end to end, standing shoulder to shoulder in the clear morning light, and in the daylight I could see them properly, fully, mercilessly, for the first time. They looked like people. Perfect, flawless, uncanny people. They wore clothes spanning every era of the town's history, 1850s homespun, 1920s work denim, 1960s church dresses, modern fleece jackets. The accumulated wardrobe of every person Hollow Creek had ever lost. Their faces were calm. Their eyes were open. They were all looking at my window. And every single one of them had my face. The man in the flannel shirt who'd been Harold Ennis last night now wore my features, my jaw, my brow, the small scar above my left eye from a childhood bike accident. The teenager in the Hollow Creek sweatshirt, my face, younger but unmistakably mine. The woman in the cardigan, the child in pajamas, the old man with a cane, all of them, my face, my build, my posture. As if the act of violence, the crossing of the line, the drawing of blood, had imprinted me onto them. I had made contact. I was the template now. They weren't facing random houses anymore. They were fanning out. Walking up to doors all along the street. Walking with my gait, my stride, the way I carry my shoulders slightly forward when I'm moving with purpose. They moved like me. They walked like me. And they were knocking. I watched one of them, wearing my face, wearing clothes I recognized from my own closet, a blue flannel I'd unpacked 2 weeks ago, walk up to Mrs. Calloway's front porch and knock. 3 knocks. Measured. Polite. And then my voice, from its mouth, warm and worried and absolutely authentic, Mrs. Calloway. It's me, it's the Landry boy. Something's wrong. I need help. Please. Through her front window, I saw her curtain move. Just a fraction. Just enough. She was looking. And she saw me, or what looked like me. The young pharmacist from down the street. The man who'd gone outside to save his little girl. The man who'd fought for his family. She'd brought me a casserole on my first day. She'd warned me about the back door latch. She'd watched me carry groceries and wave good morning every day for 2 months. She knew me. She trusted me. Who wouldn't open the door for that man? I pressed my hands against the glass. I wanted to scream, to warn her. But the rules said don't respond to voices during a sounding, and I knew, with a certainty that sat in my stomach like a stone, that if I shouted, my real voice and their borrowed one would be indistinguishable. My warning would only confirm the deception. She'd hear 2 versions of me, one inside and one outside, and she'd have no way to know which was real. Mrs. Calloway's front door opened. The thing wearing my face smiled, my smile, the exact one I use when I'm trying to be reassuring, the one Dana calls my everything's fine smile, and stepped inside her house. Her door closed behind it. I dropped the curtain. My hands were shaking. My legs gave out and I sat on the floor beneath the window and listened to the sounds of my own fists knocking on every door on Sycamore Lane, my own voice asking each of my neighbors, the people who'd welcomed me, warned me, brought me coffee and casseroles and patience, to please, please, open up. The second siren sounded at 8:30. An hour and 14 minutes. When the silence came, I sat on the floor for a long time before I could stand. I went to Mrs. Calloway's house. I knocked on her door. Nobody answered. The door was unlocked. Her living room was exactly as it had always been, doilies on the armrests, photos on the mantel, the ceramic dish she'd brought our casserole and sitting clean on the kitchen counter. Her shoes were by the door. Her coat was on the hook. Her reading glasses rested on the end table beside a folded newspaper, open to the crossword she'd been working. The house was empty. Tom Hendricks was gone too. And the Boyds, from the corner lot. I found out later that afternoon, when people emerged blinking and shaking from their locked houses and began the quiet, methodical process of checking on each other that was, I now understood, a census. A body count. Ray called me that evening. His voice was flat and scraped clean of everything but exhaustion. 3 houses, he said. 3 families opened their doors. They saw your face. They trusted you. I couldn't speak. You saved your daughter, he said. I understand that. I'd have done the same. But you need to understand what happened today. They've never come in daylight. They've never pushed through walls. They've never worn one face. You gave them something they didn't have before, a way in that doesn't require mimicry. They don't need to guess who you trust anymore. They just need to be you. And everyone in this town knows you. He hung up. That was 4 days ago. The siren has sounded every night since, and once more during the day. Each time, they come wearing my face, dozens of me, filling the streets, knocking on every door with my knuckles, calling out in my voice with specific, personal things that only I would know. Details from conversations I've had at the pharmacy, at the diner, at school pickup. They're not just copying my appearance. They're copying my life. My relationships. My knowledge. As if hitting the one in the yard opened a channel, and everything I am poured through it. The walls in our house creak now even when the siren is silent. That low hum, the frequency of the thing I struck, the tone from its open mouth, lives in the structure. I feel it in the floors when I walk. Dana feels it in the bed frame at night. The boundary between inside and outside is thinning, and I'm the one who thinned it, and I don't know how to make it thick again. I saved my daughter. I need you to understand that. I went outside and I fought and I brought her back and she is alive and warm and she sleeps in a bed with nailed shut windows and a bolted door and she still tells me this is the best place she's ever lived. I did what any father would do. I did the right thing. But Josiah Parnell was right. The consequence is not mine alone to bear. The compact was a door, and I opened it, and what came through is wearing my face and knocking with my hands and smiling my smile, and the people who know me, who trust me, who would help me, they are the ones who pay. I'm writing this in the morning. The sun is out. The town looks peaceful from the kitchen window and I can see the water tower, the siren mounted on its side like a mouth waiting to open. Nora is at the table eating cereal. Dana is standing at the counter with her coffee, looking at me with the expression she wears now, the one that isn't quite anger and isn't quite grief and isn't quite fear, but something underneath all 3. She doesn't say it. She doesn't have to. I can see the question in her face, the one she'll never ask out loud because the answer is a door she doesn't want to open. When the siren sounds tonight, and the knocking starts, and my voice calls from every porch on Sycamore Lane, how long before someone new opens their door? How long before the faces I borrowed become the bridge to the next family, the next house, the next empty living room with shoes by the door and glasses on the table and no one left to wear them? How long before the walls stop being enough? I check the locks. I check the bolt. I check the curtains and the deadbolt and the windows I've nailed shut one by one. And I sit in the dark with my family and I listen to the sound of myself, patient and warm and trustworthy, asking to be let in. If you ever see a listing for a house in a small town in western Pennsylvania, good schools, affordable, housing included, the kind of deal that seems too good because it is. Keep scrolling. And if you're ever driving through a valley and you hear a siren, low and long, rising out of the hills like the earth is trying to warn you about something it swallowed a long time ago, do not stop. Do not pull over. Do not roll down your window. Because the thing standing on the shoulder of the road, waving you down with a friendly face and a familiar smile, asking if you need directions, it learned that face from a good man who loved his daughter enough to break the only rule that mattered. It learned that face from me. And it is so patient.